Hello, everybody. Karibuni sana. Habari zenu. Today is Monday, and it's the start of another week. And today is already, hiya. We're already in December, and it's, I think, the 2nd. Oh my goodness, how time flies. How are you guys doing? I hope you're well. I hope everything is going well. How was your weekend? Hmm? It really rained a lot. That's all I can tell you. Uh, Today, we have a very interesting topic. It's called Financial Violence and Economic Impacts of Gender Based Violence in Kenya. We're still continuing because we started our how many 16 days of activism against gender based violence just the other day. I think it was started on Monday last week. So we're, I believe, in day 7 of it already. And time is flying. So we want to maximize the use of this opportunity because we know that all eyes are on this subject, a very important subject. But before I go on, why don't I invite into studio my wonderful colleague Susan, who is our lawyer and human rights defender. Hello, Susan. Karibu sana.
Hello, how are you? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I believe we're all very well, Susan. Happy to see you. How was your weekend?
It was interesting. We got into on Sunday morning, we got into a big jam trying to get to church. There was a marathon, and people didn't know about it. Seems the information was not out or shared well. So we went
I didn't hear
round
of
and
it.
round. Yeah, we went round and round in circles and finally gave up and went to a church near our home because we couldn't cross. Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
I'd seen that they had actually talked about some roads being closed, but this is Kenya government for you. I don't understand why we have so much technology, but just using the phone to notify people, that would really be nice, so that we know. Like if we had an app that we could download that talked about the state of the roads and how to get round, that would be important. And the reason why we discuss these things, you guys, is because this is part of our daily life. Apart from gender-based violence, we are living in the world, and there's a lot of confusion. It's just the state of the world. It's a lot of confusion, and not being able to attend your service and your mass on a day just because they're doing a marathon on a Sunday morning is weird. That is really weird, Susan.
Oh, it was very frustrating. We go this way, we find a barricade. You go this way, you find a queue of cars. And then, people started reversing, driving on the wrong side of the road, climbing culverts. It was just very chaotic. Yeah, very, very chaotic.
You know what?
So,
Me and my conspiracy theories. Me and my conspiracy theories. I think is your church one of the ones that gave back the money back to the president? That could be a punishment. They're not going to get enough money from their congregants. That's a conspiracy theory. I tell you, you know what? Maybe the government is trying to frustrate churches. You guys, you're not going to have nobody coming to church because we're going to make sure there's a marathon all over Nairobi. Anyway, that's besides the point. Today we're discussing a crazy subject here. Are you still there, Susan?
yep.
Okay.
Yes, I am. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So today we're talking about financial violence and economic impacts of GBV. Susan, how does financial violence differ from physical violence in gender-based violence in Kenya? Just briefly, like what's the difference?
Yeah.
I mean, what is financial violence? For the sake of everybody else who wants to watch us here, and welcome all guys. Welcome to the live stream. You can either watch it and comment right there in the comment section within the StreamYard, or you can go into YouTube or Facebook and comment in there. Welcome, welcome again. I see some eyes over there. One person is watching us. Invite other people to the show. Let's talk about this issue because I know a lot of women and men suffer this. If you see if you actually see the thumbnail that I presented, there's one of a woman experiencing financial violence as well as a man.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
It's
both
actually
genders.
both. Yeah, it's actually both because it
Hmm.
depends on who has the control in the house. If you're talking in the context of a home, who has that control, who has financial superiority and is exerting it? Because you could have financial superiority, but you're not exerting it, you know, or you're more respectful of the relationship between, you and your partner, or you and your spouse. But in certain cases, that's not the case. So it's actually both. Both. In fact, the statistics, um, KDHS statistics say that 11% women, that is,
Mm-hmm.
out of every 100 women, 11 of them say that they are subject. This is in Kenya, are subjected to economic violence, and by their current partner or spouse, right? And 6% men. And then in all forms of violence, where it's combined, a mixture of it in a relationship. When we're talking about married or women with a spouse, with a partner, um, it's 41% women and 36% men. So in every 100 women, 41 of them reported that they were experiencing this cocktail of abuse, including economic violence. And then 36% in every 100 men, 36 were saying they were being subjected to the cocktail of abuses and violence. So you can see those are the statistics. What economic violence is when it has some nuances there. So it includes withholding of financial resources. This could be household costs. This could be refusing to contribute to the household and stuff like that, or restricting access. So you prevent somebody from attending school. They can't go for further studies, for instance, or going to work. You make sure that they're not fit to go to work. Maybe there's been some battery that has taken place, and instead of going to work, you have to go to the hospital, or the victim is too embarrassed to go to the workplace, so they'd rather stay home. So women and men who are subjected to this type of violence are not able to go to work, so they stay up, and that is a way of restricting the black eye, the swollen face, too many questions, and stuff like that. Limiting working hours as well, so that instead of you being able to work a full day, somebody's interfering with your work, so you have to leave half day. Get these phone calls, and then also taking one's pay. So, for instance, there was the case of Osinachi that Maureen and I looked at is it 2022? The musician from Nigeria. And one of the things that her husband was doing was that whenever she sang, he was collecting the money. So that was a classic case of economic abuse, economic violence, right? And so he was collecting the money. So she had no money, yet she was the one who was doing the singing. And we know how tragically that story ended. And then the other one is interfering with work or education, sabotaging, going to the boss and, just making it difficult for you to study, going to the boss and sort of making it difficult for you to work in certain spaces, and saying, oh, you can only work here and you cannot be sent out, you cannot do this, trying basically, it's quite embarrassing for your workmates to know too much about your home life. So just interfering with your capacity to develop in the workplace or even in school or any other space. It could be church, it could be anywhere where you're respected, that type of humiliation is taking place. So it's also affecting your income. The other one is threats to kick you out of the house, and or to get your employment terminated. And we know cases like that, where one spouse has gone, and because they're not comfortable with their spouse being out of their control or outside their sphere of influence, they sort of manipulate the situation, so your employment is terminated. It's too much trouble for your employer to keep you in that workspace, so eventually you find yourself out of a job. The other one is withholding benefits. So for instance, making it difficult for somebody to get subsidies or benefits. And economic violence, one thing I want to say, is not just within the context of the household. It could even be an employer exerting this against you. So it's anybody who is in a position of a stronger bargaining power, or who has, where there's an imbalance of power and they have a stronger bargaining power. So the withholding of benefits, refusing to let you claim benefits, or withholding subsidies. Um, in the context of the home, it's even taking your children's money. In a setup, in a family setup, you could be saving money for the children's education, for something, and it's birthday money even, it's just taken and misdirected. So in a nutshell, that is what economic violence is, and I think it's something that we know. So related to that is economic abuse, which is exerting control. This is the UN definition: exerting control over income, spending, bank accounts, bills, or borrowing, and controlling access to transport, technology, and other things. So it's a control. So it's actually about control. The abuse, the economic abuse is about control, so that they're inhibiting your access, they're inhibiting your access to the things that would help you to advance as a man or a woman, or a boy or a girl. Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. That's what the definition is. I don't know whether somebody has something to add on the chat about what economic abuses or economic violence, or an experience that they have, want to share in terms of something they've witnessed or seen in the media that would enrich this conversation. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I realize I'm muted. Yeah. Thank you very much, Susan. That's really helpful. Yeah, guys, so that is financial violence and economic abuse. You've heard about it. And actually, in my experience, just my experience in terms of people that I know, especially, this seems to be the most common sort of violence that is across the board. I'm surprised that the figures are so low at 11% or 6% as charged. I mean, as reported by people, 6% for
Yeah.
men and 11% for women, just
Mm.
economic violence, financial violence, or even financial abuse. I was wondering, I mean, because I think if you hear most of the complaints of, for example, people, let's
Yeah.
let's let's not talk about relationships. Yeah, let's not talk about the
Yes.
workplace for this minute. Let's say in
Yeah.
relationships, most of the
Yeah.
complaints that I hear from people who are unhappy in relationships,
Yeah.
or the main reason why many people divorce, is because of finances. Yeah, so that means there must be some financial abuse somewhere that's going on. So, for example, you hear stories about a woman who maybe is working. Here's another where the tables are turned. The woman is working, and the man is the one who collects the money, just like Osinachi. Osinachi, the musician of Nigeria. I know several women who have experienced this kind of thing. They're working, but the husband is the one who actually collects the check. And it's even in NGOs, this is one of the biggest problems. Like you'll be finding, like we're funding a big project, maybe in the rural area. And for example, here's an example, a project that we funded in the rural area where it was a dairy development project. The
Yeah.
women are the women are the ones who usually make milk the cows, and we actually set up what they call cooling plants for the milk. Okay, it was a
Yeah.
rural, very poor rural area. I was the evaluator on that, monitor and evaluator on that particular project, and I believe everybody knows about this because it's published information. But this was a very rural place in Kenya, and this our project decided to introduce cooling stations for milk, like cooling tanks, really huge cooling tanks, so that we can
Mm-hmm.
have economies of scale, and we have more farmers contributing into those cooling tanks their milk. And then that milk is measured and the quality is determined at that point. And all we had to do is create memorandums of understandings with big companies, the big dairy manufacturers, dairy processors. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all they
Yeah.
would do, they bring their big trucks to the cooling plant and collect like 5,000 liters of milk at once. So what happened
Mhm.
is that it became very lucrative. It became very lucrative for that particular community, and that community quickly became wealthy. Now, the farmers are not paid every day. So what would happen is that you would always find a whole line of women bringing the milk, but when it comes to payday, it's the men who come to collect the money. That's it. And what happens is that this happens actually in many of the sectors of agriculture in Kenya, whether it's maize farming or tea farming or coffee farming. You find it's the women who are doing all the labor, but when it comes to payday, it's the men who go and collect the money. And what happens is that, for example, the ladies of the night, they know when this money is being collected because number one, it's being spent in the nearby little cafes, it's being spent in the beer halls, in the beer dens, it's being
Yeah,
spent. The ladies come from far and wide to come and consume with these men, and all the lodgings and boardings are full. Yes. And what
yeah,
happened is that now we had another problem. We had a problem
yeah,
of success. We trying to manage the success, trying to help. Now we had problems with the family dynamics. Yeah, where you're thinking that that you're actually resolving a problem, but you're actually creating one. Yeah.
yeah,
So this actually happened, and we turned very poor people into very rich people in a very, very short time. And now we had a problem of managing the success because financial abuse was going on. The women were
yeah,
not, they were doing all the hard work, but they were not able to access the money. So now here we are. We had children who are not going to school. Yeah, because their school fees was not paid. We had
yeah,
women who now had to have second wives and third wives brought, onto their, So these people
yeah,
actually, added more. They added more luggage instead of actually trying to reduce the luggage and trying to spread, to improve their financial situation as a family. It actually became worse in many instances.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's
In
quite
fact,
interesting anyway.
yeah, I
That's
know.
on a larger scale. Yeah.
Yeah, I came across a situation where this family, they were growing peas, and all the hard work was done by the woman of the house, the mother, the wife, and in the night before the harvest, uh, the spouse arranged for people to harvest. So when the wife came to harvest, she found that the field had already been harvested and buried away, and so there was nothing for her to harvest. So when we're talking about economic violence and economic abuse, those are the type of things we're talking about. Somebody else is working, somebody else is pocketing the money, and it's something that we know, like Queen Moa said, is something that is happening in around us, and sometimes people don't even realize that it's actually abuse, that is actually violence that is taking place. That this is not right. That for instance, if you're the one who has done the work, that your spouse should be pocketing the money, and there's no agreement that that is what should be happening. And not even 1 shilling goes to you. And like Maureen said, Queen Mo said, the children are not in school, the electricity is not paid, there's no food on the table, and those are the secondary things that occur. So
And on the flip side,
yeah,
before the guys come after us, before Mato decides he's coming on here, yeah,
yeah,
one of the worst things that a man can encounter is a woman opening the door for them at the end of the day and saying, "There's no milk, there's no bread, there's
yeah,
no this." Yeah. If there's anything, as a single parent, I remember on my days as a single parent, that was one of the things that I told my helps in the house. Never
yeah,
in your life meet me at the door with a complaint.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I said to them, you know what? You have a piece of paper and a pen. Yeah. The days that we go shopping, put those
yeah,
things on the list. If they are not there, create alternatives. If you forgot
yeah,
to put bread on the list, make porridge or make pancakes or do something. But
yeah,
do not come to me at the door saying, Mama, hakuna hi, hakuna ile, hakuna. It's so irritating. I consider that financial abuse because it's abuse of your privilege. It's an abuse. Actually, it's an abuse because it denies you of peace. It denies you of peace. So I know very many men actually spend a lot of time in the bars because they don't want to be told. They don't want to go home and be told, oh, by the way, there's no the children's uniforms. Oh, by the way, the petrol. I need this, I need that, I need that. There has to be a way for people to learn to communicate financially, their financial needs to one another. People should learn to communicate. Now, in the workplace, another way of financial abuse is to pay women less than men for the same job. It's very
Yeah,
common, like in the US, 75 cents of every dollar. A woman earns 75 cents of every dollar that a man owns. At least the last
yeah,
time that I was there and listening to statistics, that's the situation. That is financial abuse.
yeah,
Yeah, that's financial
yeah,
abuse, and
yeah,
it's not right, and it's one of the things that has caused many people to leave their jobs, many people to leave their relationships. It looks
yeah.
petty, but it's major.
Yeah, that is that is very true. And when we look at we've talked about the definition of economic violence and economic abuse, and something that's used to mitigate, because it's about power, is economic empowerment, which mitigates that difference, and it sort of elevates the oppressed side, so that they are able to be empowered to make decisions and to have access to finances and resources and stuff like that. But before we go there, maybe we can just look at, we've talked about some of the impacts of the economic violence. But let's talk about the economics vis-a-vis the issue of sexual and gender-based violence. Is it a cause? Is it because I know Mato has been coming here and telling us about what is it? I think something fair. What is it, Queen Mo? Something fair? What is it? You're muted. You're muted. He says what about
Amekula
fair?
fair. They have eaten the
Amekula.
fair.
Yeah, Amekula
Amekula
fair.
fair.
Yeah. And
That
he
means
was
he's,
sort of
yeah. Okay.
suggesting it's a trigger. It's a trigger, because
Hmm.
that transactional relationship has been failed. Money has been given, dinner has been bought, or whatever it is, and then the lack of the follow through. So it looks like, from his point of view, and maybe others will agree, especially our friends who are males, that this could be a trigger that can
Hmm.
cause violence, because you've not followed through. Some of the cases we've been following, when we look at the cases of femicide that we've been watching, that context may be there because the relationships between the male and female are transactional, and
Hmm.
so it could be a trigger. But the thing is, that doesn't justify that
Hmm.
wrong behavior, because there are other ways of dealing with situations where you feel that the transaction has collapsed. So that's a trigger. And then also, as a motive, remember, we were talking about familicide, and one of the motives of familicide is financial and lifestyle stresses. And that is
Hmm.
when there's a change in the circumstance and the individual feels they cannot cope, and so they end up unaliving the entire family, or
Hmm.
whichever member of the family is present in the home. So that
Hmm.
happens. So those are
Hmm.
the nuances of economic aspects, and how they are triggers to violence, and how they are can be a motive for familicide in particular.
Yeah.
So if we look at economic empowerment, I mean, what is that? How would you describe it in your words? What would you say, Queen Mo, and anybody else who's
What I would,
watching?
before we even go to economic empowerment, I just wanted to
Yeah,
paint the picture currently, because I had this
yeah,
chat earlier today
yeah,
about
yeah,
what is the economic situation that we're facing, or what have we
yeah,
been through over the past few years, which has probably
yeah,
contributed to even more of this kinds of gender-based violence, financial abuse, and economic violence, financial violence and economic abuse. So
yeah,
basically what happened is that, first of all, we were just having this discussion with a friend of mine today, and I was asking her, she's actually a consultant, and I was asking her, how is business? And she's not even in Kenya, by the way. And she says, Ooh, this has been a really tough year. It has This has been the toughest year. I thought that if I've survived this year, then I think I can survive like about any year. And she
Yeah,
said that it's gotten so bad to the point where, Susan and everybody who's listening, people are borrowing from others or from her and saying, you know what, I can't even promise to pay you back. I'll do my best to pay you back, but I'm not
yeah,
even sure I'll be able to do that. Okay. So we find that freelancers and consultancy people who are not fully employed, who are the majority, by the way, are struggling.
yeah,
And she said that anybody who has a job, a full time job right now, should be really grateful. And we went
yeah,
through various, fields of work. It doesn't matter what field of work you are, whether you're a
mm,
professional or non professional, a lot of people are struggling. Businesses are struggling, professionals are struggling, and this all started even before COVID, because you remember the COVID situation in 2020. Yeah.
yeah,
Even before
yeah,
that, in 2016, when Trump was president. Yeah. Like, for example, in Africa, when the NGO world, this is when the freelancers really started having a hard time. When they started to close the big projects, the HIV/AIDS projects, and things that were actually employing so many Kenyans and so many Africans. So, what happened when Trump came to power? A lot of the jobs were moved away from China and to South America to try to help South Americans remain in America. And then a lot of the aid that was actually earmarked for this part of the world was actually stopped. Yeah, it was actually stopped or reduced. Yeah. So even when you did get work, like for example, even right now, you hear stories about, for example, the IT hub, which is in Roiro. Yeah. You find there's a lot of IT companies, yeah, technology companies that are hiring Kenyans and paying them only $2 a day or something like that, which is such a pittance of a salary. They're underpaying them, and they're struggling to try to make ends meet with these kinds of pay structures. So they said that the courts, okay, and then in the meantime, even with the lawyers, even lawyers, we saw them during COVID. We saw them out there in their cars with food in their trucks in the back of their boots. The courts were closed because they were not working online at that particular time. Okay. Again, we have not right now, we have AI, artificial intelligence, which is taking up a lot of our jobs. Yeah, so this is the situation. We are actually being bombarded with a lot. Right now, we're also facing very high taxes. We're facing high taxes. And at the same time, also, we are also finding that certain sectors and certain places, many businesses are not keeping up and therefore they're going to be closed. Recently, we're hearing rumors that if a specific bill goes through, the banks will be affected. We are looking, there's a bill that's in Parliament currently to try to raise the baseline for, the kind of the money that each bank holds up to 10
yeah,
billion shillings
mm,
from 1 billion
mm,
shillings. Yeah. As a sort of cushion. But the thing is, very many banks are going to actually have to be merged or just stop operating altogether. So we're looking at the loss of between 7 and 11,000 jobs, direct jobs. Yeah.
yeah,
So we have
mm,
also the cost of living situation. Every day people are struggling, even when it comes to the seasonal labor. What that means is that if there's seasonal labor at all, for example, outside the country, it means that there's no real assured income throughout the whole year. So
yeah,
in the end, you find that you really cannot plan. If you look at America, you have the growth of the van life. Yeah, people are living in their vans, parking at
yeah,
Walmart. Yeah, and I ask myself, what is the difference between that and the living in the what they call the slums in Kenya,
yeah,
where people have to share toilets and bathrooms. The van life, though, is even more risky because you're not assured of a parking space where you can live. Yeah, and even
yeah,
stay in your car, you can be attacked very easily in your car. So basically, there's a lot of diasporans who are also suffering
yeah,
right now. There are many because apart from the taxes, there's also things to do with visa fees that are being increased for families living abroad. There are many people being told, like I heard, what was his name, Trump saying, okay, so we know that Nigerians are very smart, they're very brilliant, we know you Africans are very smart, and you've contributed a lot to our country, but you know what, you need to go back to Africa and make Africa great again. And it's better that he's telling them, you better leave before I come, because we're going to be serious about removing you. So a lot of
Yeah.
people are feeling, the pressure and the strain of these very uncertain times. The uncertainty is also contributing to a lot
Yeah.
of pressure in the homes and
Yeah.
and amongst people, and even amongst employer and employees. Yeah. So what we're saying is that this is the consumerism culture. On the other hand, again, I was listening to TikTok. I've been listening to TikTok groups in the evening, and many women, many young women are being asked by men, "What do you bring to the table? What do you bring to the table?" And the women are tongue tied. They're like, "What do you mean? What do I bring to the table?" Those are not questions that were even asked of our grandmothers, because it was assumed that when you come to the table, you're coming there to give birth to the next generation, and that's a very big thing that you bring to the table, and that you're going to bring hard work and you're going to bring support to the family, and this is the reason why bride price is paid for women, for example. So however, things have changed so much now that the two income family is required, is almost a requirement for people to actually be able to afford to live together. So I'm just painting this scenario where we have come from, a pandemic. Okay, we're coming from a pandemic. People haven't recovered yet from that pandemic. Now we're into new and higher taxes. And then we're also into new policies and new governments, like, for example, in the US, okay, the issue of migration. There's a lot that people are facing right now. And everywhere you turn, everywhere you go, you hear people complaining about their finances. It's making many people not. It's causing depression. It's causing violence. It's causing a lot of strain in families. A lot. And so people will do whatever it takes. Even in the diaspora, I know a lot of couples who have separated just so that the woman can actually access benefits. Yeah, the woman and the children can access benefits. The man agrees to leave because of the pressure, the financial pressure on him. This is like sometimes an agreement, and in many cases, it's not. And what happens is that as long you see what happens when people don't live together long enough, what happens? Eventually, that relationship can easily break.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
this is the
That's
kind of
true.
situation that many people are facing currently. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And that
just to
question of
continue
what do you
that,
bring to the table is really
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Just to build on what Queen Mo has talked about, just giving the story, giving us a feel of, the situation. Let's think about what do women actually bring to the table. And women actually bring a lot to the table. They are and they are farmers, they have businesses, they have the little kiosks, they have all these things that they go and sell. They wake up really early in the morning and then they go to the marketplace, they have their cows, they have all this that they're doing. So there's a lot they bring to the table. They have very innovative, those who can stitch, those who can do something else, they do it. And so women are always really, really busy trying to find ways to supplement the income at home and also for themselves. Women have grown into this space where they want to be able to stand up and be counted when it comes to contributing, say, to the household economy. So it's really important for them. So they bring these things, and yet they are more affected by poverty, by discrimination, and exploitation. So I want us just to picture those little things or those big things that women do, because we have the whole range. We're talking about women in all contexts, um, you know, from the house manager to maybe the professional to presidents of various institutions. They're really high-flying women, but they're all they come in and they actually make a contribution when it comes also to the homemaking. you know the time spent in homemaking, the time spent in looking after the children, the time spent in looking after the spouse or intimate partner, it is actually valuable. You can actually put a cost to it, because if the woman was not doing that, you may have to actually hire somebody to do that work, but she's doing it. And I know in some situations there, you know, in some situations maybe the more forward thinking partners will think, okay, she's at home, so I will give her this allowance, and an allowance that she can go and do her hair, she can go meet her friends, she can contribute to the merry-go-rounds, those um, uh, sort of uh, little financing schemes that women have so that they can, collect money to buy a little plot or to do something to furnish, to cover their chairs, or do some. And it's interesting because when women have money, they contribute, they get that money so they can do something to improve the home or to benefit their children. It's very rarely for themselves. It's always for somebody else. So when we think about that context, that women are actually contributors to the household economy, to the workspace, to the national economy, where women are actually contributors. They're the ones who pick the tea mostly, they pick the coffee mostly. They're in the farms doing some of this work, so they're really busy. So when we think about that, we realize that one of the reasons why this violence is perpetrated against them is that we talked about that power imbalance. So one of the mitigating factors is to build their empowerment. And so what is empowerment? What is empowerment? Economic empowerment as defined as the processes by UN Women, the process of enhancing individuals' economic states, including income generation, employment opportunities, and financial independence. Improving of enhancing individuals' economic states, including through income generation, employment opportunities, and financial independence. It is the ability to make and act on decisions that involve the control over allocation of financial resources. This is somebody called Gola. So empowerment involves agency. That is an individual's ability to make and act on his or her own choices. So, and second is resources, to make decisions, including authority to make decisions. And in fact, these things I'm talking about are what are used to gauge, to monitor. When we're doing monitoring and evaluation, these are the indicators that are looked at. The other one is achievements. What are the outcomes of the decision-making processes? And are women involved in decision-making processes? That's always a question that comes up. Are they involved in this? Who controls? How much land do they have? How much land do men have? Do women have? How much time is spent on certain activities? These are the things that show empowerment. If a lot of time is spent, say, in the home, and little time is spent trying to sell your vegetables, whatever it is, or go to the workplace, then you can see there's an imbalance right there. And I know many of us can give examples that we have witnessed or even been experienced, whether we are males or females, because right now we have people calling themselves house husbands. They're the ones at home with the children, because it's in the economy you're in, it might be easier for the wife or intimate partner to get a job than it is for males to get a job. And also depends on in the area of work, where there might be more jobs in a certain area of work than in another area of work. So those are some of the things that we need to look at: agency, resources, and achievement. And this is a problem, this is a situation that we can all solve together. It's something that we can all solve together. So we look at the devastating effects of economic violence and economic abuse on one's life, on how it impacts that person, how it impacts your home, how it impacts your society, then it's something that we really want to say no to, as activists. We can call ourselves activists, or people who support and promote non-violence. So we need to really look at that, in a very clear way. So what are the benefits of empowerment? And women in this context are seen as rights holders. So they are able to demand that the government, for instance, will create a conducive environment where women, yeah, are able to thrive. Okay, in some circumstances, there might be situations where the men need to be empowered. Um, but for now, let's just use the word women. So the women are the rights holders. The duty bearer is government, right? So some of the benefits are uh, it's essential to achieving women's rights and gender equality. And we know that when we are achieving gender equality, we are reducing or we are addressing the imbalance, the power imbalance that occurs, and which is as a result of that, women become victims of gender-based violence and sexual violence. And the other one is it ensures women's participation and benefits from decent work and social protection. Of course, we know the social protection are the initiatives that are there from government and other institutions, county governments. In Kenya, it would be the county government and even the national government that will support or will cushion the more, the families that are in need. We have various social protection programs in this country, and I'm sure you have some also in your countries. Where you're staying and around you. And then there's also access to markets and control over their time, lives, and bodies. It also, this is what women empowerment does. It increases voice and agency and meaningful participation in decision making. So let's talk about this at this point. At this point, we're talking about women's representation in politics, women's representation in senior positions in various institutions. And right now, our constitution has this affirmative action, and also we call it the two-third gender rule, which sort of means, this is in Kenya now, I'm sure if you go to your various countries, you'll have similar rules about how many males can be, how many of one gender can be in a board, or how many of one gender can sit in parliament or, or wherever. So here in Kenya, it's a two-third gender rule. This has not been achieved. It's very difficult to achieve. The law has not been passed. It's one of the things that the the National Gender and Equality Commission is pushing for, as are other civil society organizations that are involved in equality and inclusion. So that's something that people are still struggling with. And the question is, of course, why? And we can give many reasons as to why it's really a challenge for that law to be passed. In fact, the Supreme Court has even passed in Kenya, has passed rulings and said this needs to be done by this time. And one of the indictments against the current government and even the past governments after the 2010 constitution was that they had not observed the two-thirds gender rule. So even if we count, we can still see we are lacking. And that's perhaps why you see there are more women who are nominated in certain positions than men, especially when we're talking about elected positions. So you can also share what you're seeing in your countries about that gender balance in various institutions, and what are the benefits of that? What are the benefits of having that gender balance? What do you think, Queen Mo? What are the benefits of having gender balance in, let's say, Parliament or the Senate or in the judiciary?
Yeah. Like now, the best MP, the award for the best MP was given to a woman MP in Kenya recently. Okay. Gathoni
Yeah,
wa Mushomba. Gathoni wa Mushomba is a human rights defender.
yeah.
She has been defending not just her constituents, but all people. She has spoken against all the injustices that have happened, including, femicide, the femicides that are going on, the abductions of the protesters, the young protesters earlier in the year. Gathoniwa Mushomba, has been there agitating against, the impeachment of the president in the way that it was done. She has been agitated. She has also brought out the issue of when people lost their homes. The evictions of people from their homes. There's nothing that Gadhonu Mushomba is not involved in. She, even if she's an UDA MP, I believe, is she? She's an UDA MP, and yet she still remembers the people. She puts the constituents first. And
Yeah.
being a woman, that is very telling that she is, I believe, an elected MP. I don't think she's a
Yes,
nominated
she's
MP. Yeah, she
she's
is an
she's
elected
elected.
MP. And this is a
Yeah.
reason why many of the nominated MPs are actually very ineffective, because to be nominated by the president, it means that you must have favor, isn't it? You have to have some sort of favor or knowledge. It's who people were also accused. There has been some sort of rumors and accusations of people having to pay, okay, to get nominated. But in the case where they're elected, the elected MPs seem to be quite, formidable force and people who are doing their work. So I think that she has also brought up the cause of women. The other person is Pasaris. Esther Passaris
Mm-hmm.
has also said that she has also been agitating for the rights of women. So I think that has really helped. It gives women a voice, and they say that they're no longer going to be quiet. Women are saying that they're not going to be quiet anymore because of the injustice, and they want the Kenya government to listen to the issues of femicide, and they do have their MPs listening. Now, the other thing is that there are very many men MPs, but very few of them actually speak out against the injustices happening to women and girls and children. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, I think it's very important to have some sort of gender balance, because some of the advances that you're seeing in countries such as Uganda and Rwanda, because they actually observe more representation in parliament. I believe that in Uganda, for example, it could be up to 50-50. The same thing with Rwanda.
Yeah.
And you can see how far ahead those countries are. The same thing in
Yeah.
Tanzania, you have at least a woman president. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, we are already lagging behind our neighbors in many ways, especially in
Yeah.
terms of human rights. And one of them would be this issue of financial violence and economic impacts. I think that there should be a way to introduce some sort of gender-based accounting, gender-based financial management, especially when it comes to like giving bursaries at the universities, for example, to
Oh
ensure
yeah.
that we have an equal number of young girls and also young men accessing educational opportunities. Yeah,
Yeah.
engendering the budget. Again, engendering the budget means that you always remember that when it comes to your health, the healthcare like SHA, that there will be adequate finances to take care of things to do with maternity care for women,
Yeah.
gynecological care for women, because you're talking about your next generation. You need to ensure that the women are not dying in childbirth, that the women have access to quality health care as well as quality, services, access to
Yeah.
services near them. So they have to find a way to make the budget more gender friendly and specifically look at the needs of women per se. And many men cannot really necessarily represent women very effectively because they are not women anyway.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
again, the issue of the cost of living when it comes to inflation. There could be controls on the prices of some of the foods that are accessed by women, so that women are able to feed their families a
Yeah.
balanced diet. When it comes to things like land allocation, when it comes to do with it in succession and inheritance, we really need these women. And unfortunately, the women who are currently engaged or in government, for example, in the arm of government, we have the chief justice, who's a woman. We have the deputy chief justice, who's a woman in Kenya. We also have
Yeah.
the who else do we have? Who's attorney general is a woman, and
Yeah.
yet there are so many cases of femicide in the country, and they keep on ongoing. They're ongoing. How is that possible? That they're not, so it means that it's not necessarily true that only women, or that having women in positions of power will necessarily create a better status for women. But if the
Yeah.
women were in as members of parliament, it means that we are represented by those people at the National
Yeah.
Assembly. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
they can influence what happens in the courts, what happens in the justice system, in the other arm of government. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
making any sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, in fact, we have a lot of like to support empowerment, to support issues of advancement, equality, and imbalance in power. We have the Women's Association of Judges and Women's Association of this and that. So the women sometimes caucus together to encourage one another and really to elevate or to raise the level of engagement and voice in certain discourses or discussions. So the other one is to promote women's economic justice and rights and closes gender gaps in line with the SDGs. So this is another thing that the women's empowerment does as rights holders, and also it promotes gender equality and women's empowerment contributes to ending things like hunger, because women will if you provide them the space, they're going to make sure their families are not hungry. That guarantees food security. They'll make sure that they're farming nutrition. They'll observe the rules because they're keen on their children eating well, and realization of the right to food. So these are just a few of the
Yeah.
benefits of
Yeah, let
empowerment
me
of
add
women.
another
Yeah.
benefit, Susan.
Yeah.
There's a report that I read,
Yeah.
about it was written by it was published by the Star newspaper, written by a lady called Betty Kabari. She's a researcher
Yeah.
of Women Rights Division, okay? And there's a
Yeah.
picture in there. It's titled "Girls Need Government to Bring Facts, Not Feelings, to Policy
Yeah.
Making." Okay? And
Yeah.
you see the
Yeah.
policymakers are the MPs, aren't they? You know?
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
the lawmakers, actually. They're the lawmakers. The policymakers, I believe, will be the senators, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So he was talking about, in this article, it's talking about ridiculous statements by the governor of Bungoma County, Kenneth Lusaka, okay, which is concerning and has brought concerns that the government of Kenya intends to continue trampling upon children's rights under the guise of addressing the challenges facing the country's adolescents. So they talked about that in a meeting with the press. That governor, Kenneth Lusaka, he called for the banning of girls from school while pregnant and after they give birth, supposedly as a means to address teenage pregnancy. This approach, according to them, has no basis in fact, as data by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics show that girls with no education are 3 times more likely to get pregnant than girls with a secondary education. Similarly, girls with a primary education are half as likely to become pregnant as girls with no education at all. Okay, so this is the governor's proposal. This is a male governor in the light of, and we brought this issue up earlier, in light of the fact that we have an escalating number of girls who are taking their exams in hospital beds because they are pregnant, they're underage and pregnant. This governor of Bungoma County believes that the solution is to ban the girls from school while pregnant and after they give birth. In other words, to deny young girls the opportunity to have an education. So two wrongs, I guess, are going to make a right in his view. And this is the reason why we need more women fighting for the cause of girls. Again, I would like to draw your attention to a video that you guys should go and watch. It's called "My Wife, My Abuser." This one is actually talking about physical violence on a male, but also financial violence on the man. It's called "My Wife, My Abuser," and it's a British guy. It's about a British guy who is abused by his wife. Did you watch it? Yeah. It's a British guy that's abused by
I
his wife
saw it.
and
Yeah.
in front of the children physically, but also there's a financial and economic impact there because he is the one who purchased the home. He purchased the home that they're living in, and he was actually abused for almost a decade by this woman and could not come out. He could not come out to talk about it because he feared, what would happen to him, especially when he was restraining her by holding her hands down every time she would punch him and, met a lot of physical violence on him. And so he was afraid because of the laws that are very punitive towards men. He was afraid of going to, of figuring out, of using the legal channels to address the issues. So he told a friend who told him that he's going to risk his friendship. He apologized in advance because he said he's going to risk his friendship, but he has to report it after seeing a video that he shared with him. Yeah, this guy shared this video because he recorded his wife in secret abusing him. So what we're saying is financial violence and economic impacts of GBV are felt by both genders, more so by women, but also by men. So not only can women be very demanding of men in this economic times and refuse to work and believe that a man is a provider, so they should not be working, but also a woman can get away with it much easier than a man. It would be difficult for a man to be believed. So it's very important to set up these gender desks and call them women and men's desks, or have a space where men and women can come and express their grievances and try and get justice or a solution to their problems which are being felt at home. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of you just to carry on what you're talking about, the pregnancy and the economic abuse, because these are, by saying that this is Lusaka's whatever he said, the governor of, is it Bungoma, and what he said about
Yes.
teenage pregnancy and not going to school. I mean, that you can see is affecting the potential of this person to even be able to take care of their child.
Mhm.
And I was watching a video. It was, I think, a journalist from one of the main TV stations in Kenya, and he'd gone all the way to the gold mining areas of Kenya, and he talked about three girls who were pregnant, and they had been actually molested or abused by the gold mining fraternity, by people working in those gold mines, and they found
Mhm.
themselves pregnant. They got into those type of relationships because they were in need. They had an economic need, and so they compromised themselves and ended up with this baby, and now they have to look after the baby. And one of them was, I don't even know where I'm going to get the next food for this child. And so these three young ladies, which was just an exemplar of the many others in that
Mhm.
county. I think they'd recorded a really record high
Mhm.
of how many students had done the exams, sat exams, while they were expecting.
Mhm.
So it's actually, the two are connected. These young girls find themselves um, pregnant because most of them have been abused. They're not, so
Sexually
first of all, they're
abused.
not,
This is sexual
yeah,
abuse. Yeah.
yeah, they have been
Yeah.
sexually
Mhm.
abused. Yeah. So
Mhm.
first of all, they're not of the age to be able to consent to sexual activity. So already there's a crime there, there's a
Mhm.
crime that has been committed. And so they are pregnant and they can't go to school. They don't have money. They got into this because they don't have money, or they were lured or attacked, found themselves in a very difficult situation, and ended up in this situation. And so, it's just a cycle, and it's just promoting poverty. And that's why things like empowerment and fighting for equality to address that power imbalance are essential mitigating factors that will help to reduce gender-based violence. And that's where the connection is, you know. Just to give a definition of equality, because I know this is a hot topic and Mato is not here yet, that gender equality is the equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of women, men, girls, and boys. So it's across the board, right? So it's for all, it's for men, women, girls, and boys. It is a fundamental human right, and it's essential for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. So when we talk about it being essential for a peaceful world, we're talking about, if that uh, gender imbalance is addressed, then the struggles that are caused by power, imbalances will be reduced. So I think these are some of the tensions that we have to deal with in this conversation, and it's important for programs, really impactful and sustainable programs to be undertaken in communities that will help address this. Just to say that in Bungoma, Bungoma recorded the highest level of physical
Mhm.
violence on women. That is, in every 100 women, 62 recorded that they had been subjected to physical violence. And
Wow.
in Bungoma, and then in sexual violence, in every 100, 30 had recorded that they had been subjected to uh, gender-based violence, sexual assault,
Mhm.
sexual violence. And this was in the context of, I think there were just general figures there. So there were just general figures there. So what the Bungoma County, what the government is doing, at the national level, what they're doing is that they're trying to have a conversation with the Council of Elders. So they're being proactive about this. Those percentages are high, and it's this for two different things, and the Bungoma is scoring the highest.
Mhm.
Or should I say they're lowest because they're not
Mhm.
doing well. So, so it's 62% and 30%. So they have engaged the Council of Elders and the traditional structures because they're trying to help to combat sexual and gender-based violence. They're connecting this with customs, patriarchal behaviors that sort of put women in a certain position where assaulting or sexual assault is something that is not as that needs to, the way they look at it is different from the way it should be looked at. Let me use that
Mhm.
sort
Mhm.
of terminology. So they're
Mhm.
developing a strategy to engage men. So they're actually trying to approach men, and this is a good strategy. I've listened to many people talking about this, and they're trying to engage men to fight against those imbalances that are not making the world safe, the space safe for women and boys and girls,
Mhm.
and even for themselves. So men are now being engaged as champions. They're being re-educated. They have these movements and these discussions. So men are speaking out. Queen Mo, I remember you showed a video in some episodes back where you came
Mhm.
across these young men on the street, on
Oh
the
yeah.
road. I think it was Gong Road, and these were
Yeah.
men
Mhm.
who were marching against gender-based violence.
Mhm.
And this is the move that we're seeing now, the trend to raise male champions to speak out against it. And I think it has been, effective in terms
Mhm.
of, getting the constituency that is causing the most harm to speak
Mhm.
up to those who, to speak up on the issue. So,
Yeah. Actually, Susan, I'd like to show a video, maybe, if this
yeah,
is a good
yeah,
time, to show a video.
yeah.
I did find I was doing this research over the weekend myself, but it was on a different topic. But I think there's some videos here that are quite, useful. I hope I can actually show it. But anyway, it's about the topic. Just watch parts of it.
Hiyo wakati kulikuwa na lockdown na curfew ndo alikuwa na take advantage. Jo alikuwa najua kuna mahali naweza enda. Wenye niliona ananichapa vibaya na nikitu alikuwa amezoea kunichapa ovyo ovyo. Hiyo siku nikaona ataniumiza, najua ananichapanga akisema ataniua, siku moja ataniua.
Gender-based violence has become a national disaster in this nation, and therefore it needs to be dealt with as a national disaster. When COVID came, it came with that component of social distance. If you are in a situation where the husband is the one who is working, now he uses the power, which is having the money, to now manipulate or abuse this other person. So home became danger in the sense that you are forced in one way or the other to be with the perpetrator with limited options. you are supporting so many clients who are going through GBV. When you're having around 1,500 cases, that's already triple the number compared to 2019. Shelters were overwhelmed because of lack of resources. They are understaffed.
Mtoto mdogo mama yake ni mgonjwa kwa hospitali na kwao hawajiwezi.
The community, the activists, they become the first responder. And then now that also raises issues of child protection. How safe is this child with this activist? Because probably they are not trained in issues of protection. But even if they are trained, they need extra support. Because you find out that the rescue using their own finances.
Alipoletwa hali yake haikuwa mzuri because aliletwa akiwa hawezi kutembea. Alikuwa naokopa kwa kuenda kucheza nje juu hakukuwa na nguvu ya kutembea. Kitu tuliliona ilimsaidia huyo mtoto ni kumuongelesha, kufanyiwa counseling. Huyo mtoto alikaa karibu miezi miwili ndio mtoto akapona. Sasa akawa anaenda tu jirani karibu. Hakuna serikali amewahi patia mimi kitu. Wanasema tu kaa na huyu mtoto kama mtoto yako tumalize hii maneno. Mimi nafondolia kuchunga hawa watoto kwa sababu ninaona kwamba nikiwaachilia huyu mtoto ataenda kuharibika.
It's the government's responsibility to take care of its people. Violence as a way of affecting somebody's mental well-being to a point of sometimes even making smaller decisions becomes very difficult. So by the time a woman is deciding to come out of an abusive relationship, there's need to be a lot of support.
Niliamua tu kuondoka. Nikaenda hospitali. After hospitali, nikaenda direct police station. Nilikuwa nakaa tu life ya woga. But hapa at least naweza kutulia. Kansa anakuja na niongelesha hivi na hivi.
Tulienda kwa chief tukaona hatutakubali wamama wenzetu kupikwa bila makosa. Tunataka kutembea kuhamasisha wamama. Lakini wale wa serikali wanaongea tu. Tunataka serikali ingilie kwa sababu mimi naona kwa upande yangu iko uzito kubwa.
Okay, that was a short documentary, and I believe, my own observations from there, you guys. And Fia was saying that men need to collect evidence. And you see, this is evidence also. Yes, you're right, Fia. And in this particular case, having these kinds of documentaries is very helpful. It educates, it puts a face on the people who are the victims of domestic violence. We're talking today about financial and economic impacts of GBV, of gender-based violence in Kenya. Now, the economic impacts of GBV in that video, what are they there? Which ones do you see? The ones I see currently are, for example, shelter, safe spaces to live. Already the home front becomes a very dangerous place for the victim of GBV. So the government needs to inject funds to make sure that there are safe spaces and that they facilitate those people in the community who volunteer to take care of victims of GBV, even if they're young children. This particular child was actually defiled by a member of her family, okay, and therefore and she was defiled many times, and she could no longer walk. Got to the point where she could not even talk. She could only talk with the help of a counselor. All these services cost money, and they need to be funded. Susan?
Yeah, indeed. The impacts there included that, the health issues, the medical care that she needed to have, the psychological care, and it could be long term. By the way, it could take a while, because even the repair to the body, we heard that she was not walking well, or whatever it is, she was not walking well. So there could be need for maybe more than one surgery, and you can imagine somebody who's so young going through that. And then the homelessness. Now she's been uprooted from her home and taken to a place of safety. She's not with her relatives in this place. You can, again, that sense of, emotional detachment, disconnection with people, uh, even though they're dangerous. But now she has to completely, the child needs to relearn how to live in a different space. And this shelter is a temporary space. I mean, they need to rehome her, or send her, take her. She needs to be fostered, or taken care of by somebody else. And as you heard the lady saying that, they needed. First of all, there's the issue of training of the people who are taking care of these rescued individuals. Also, the tools, they need the tools they need to be equipped on how they're going to take care of them, how to manage them, and how to handle them. There's the issue of fostering. Fostering is a legal process. It's not just about signing papers. For such a case, the case goes to the children's court, and the child is placed formally with you, and there has to be a children's officer report to say that person is fit to foster that child, and that fostering will be up to the age of 18, or for a shorter period, depending on the court. And then there's also the issue of rebuilding of her life. She's just come there as she was. She has to rebuild it, her environment, obviously at some point she may need to go to school, and it'll be a different school from where she has gone to school, and all that. The legal issues, there could be a prosecution of the person who subjected her to this abuse. There could be a court case. The need for her to testify, which means she needs to come into contact with not just the children's officer, but even a prosecutor who's going to, deal with the case. The children's system, the children's justice system, the witness is protected. So there's a way of them testifying without seeing the accused person face to face. They are behind a screen and they're able to testify. Of course, even if she's testifying, the traumatizing, the re-traumatizing, reliving that trauma of if she's able to speak, uh, reliving it is something, again, that is difficult. When that goes to the health issues, she may suffer from depression, anxiety, and even that sense of low self-esteem and worthlessness. And there's so many factors that come into play. Even her relatives, let's assume that none of them will be able to foster her because maybe they don't have the economic strength to raise a child. And once a child goes through the court system, the vetting of where the child is going to be taken is perhaps a different standard than you'd find in a normal home. So there's certain criteria that needs to be met. So it's really quite a lot of things are happening in very many dimensions in that situation, and all of them have economic implications on the present and future. So the future, there are present economic implications, and there are also future ones. So it's quite and something that needs to be addressed. It impacts also her ability to, if the child is not able to recover well from all this, it will impact her ability to study, and even her potential to perhaps get into an income, or get an education, a meaningful education that will help her to support herself and even family members. So when we think about these things, the effects of economic abuse are devastating. Just think about it, and if you multiply it, these are 1, 2, 3, 4. Just look at all that is lost just from one child and other children who are in that situation. One woman and other women who are in that situation. One man and other men. And one boy and other boys. So there's a lot of loss. The community is unsafe. So of course, even the cost of securing yourself, maybe the barricades and all that. So the houses look different because of the fear of what's going on in that community. So those are just some of the things that are happening, which have an economic implication in that particular case that you saw there. And there's so many actors who she will need to interact with. Apart from the prosecutors, is the police, the ones who are investigating the case. There's the children officer, and things like that. So many people, and all of them will be asking questions. And every time she's asked the question, it becomes a nightmare again and again and again.
Again, also, Susan, I think, also the amount of time, the complaints I also saw in some of the other videos is how long these cases take. Sometimes they can take years, and at some point they get withdrawn because people can no longer tolerate the re-traumatization, as you mentioned, and also, it just becomes very difficult for the justice system to follow it up. So they're talking about the fact that they need to find ways to expedite these cases, and reduce the cost, both financially and also emotionally, to the people involved. Anyway, I think
and in
we
this
should be
particular case,
okay. We should be
sorry, in this
landing at
case
some
it
point.
was
In the next, sorry, just wanted to say, we'll probably be continuing this discussion for the next 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll be winding up. Okay.
Okay, I was saying this is the context of the family. This has happened. It's a family member who has done that. So again, at that level, there's devastation, there's scattering, and all that. And what you find, and this is something that children's rights activists really fight, is that don't allow these alternative, customary, traditional methods to be used to resolve a matter like this. It should go to court. And we will still find in some communities that is the preferred way. It's perhaps quicker, that it doesn't stop. It doesn't act as a deterrent to stop, that type of thing happening to vulnerable people. So that is another possibility. That is something that could be at play in this particular situation. So I was just going to, what's the other point I was going to make? Something else I was going to add.
While you look for that point, can I play another video, or you found it?
Okay, I found it. I was just going to talk about it. This might be relevant to the barriers to women's economic empowerment. And these are the things, when we're addressing how to move forward, these are the barriers we need to think about going over. This is a discussion that is held all the time. We hope that the money that was being given by the government to fight against gender-based violence will be put to good use, and to be reach all the 47 counties in one way or the other. And so one of the barriers is patriarchy, power imbalances. We've talked about that. Discriminatory laws. We talked about how slow the judicial process is. Actually, my experiences in the courts was that some of the delays are caused by reports not being ready, and maybe understaffing of the children's officers. They're not enough, so they have so many cases. So the probation officers also have to double up as children officers. Sometimes they're probation officers, sometimes they're children officers. But now they have to double up and try to do this background check. And then, of course, the backlog of cases in the court. Maybe there are a lot of cases. Maybe the magistrate is not available. Maybe the witnesses are not available. So there are all these human factors that cause delays in the court. There could be illness of somebody who's supposed to be testifying, and many other factors that could affect it. Also, with the police also don't always have the right attitude or approach to these things. And, because depending on their socialization and their customs and even their awareness of how grievous this situation is, they would respond differently to the economic situation. Some would think, well, what are you complaining about? The man is supposed to have the money. Yeah, you're the wife, so the man is supposed to have the money. So re-educating them, they don't understand what you're complaining about, basically. And I remember listening, and this was actually a video. It was in the States, and it was saying that even in the States they have issues, and it's a very individual thing. It depends on which police station you get to, which policeman. So it's a very subjective thing. At the end of the day, it's a very, very subjective thing. So when it comes to that, you realize that we still have a long way to go, because it's supposed to be, there's a policy, by the way, but they're not being implemented in a uniform way across the board. We're supposed to have a gender policy, which is supposed to be, working and supposed to be guiding decisions. And some counties in this nation, in our country, have county level gender policies, which are derived now from the larger national gender policy. But we know not all counties have these policies. So, and one of the things that would be in there would be the issue of economic empowerment. And then the affect, also the participation. The other thing is the unequal economic rights and opportunities trap women in poverty and create gender income gaps. And like you talked about it, you said there's a difference between how much a man and woman doing the same job will earn. I believe it's the same here in Kenya. You definitely, even if the option was there, they would pay a man more than they would pay a woman. Assumptions, of course, is that the man might be, I'm not sure whether this is the reasoning, but it could be that he's the breadwinner, so he needs more money. So the wife is not really, or the lady is not really the breadwinner. But we know very well that we have women-headed households. Many families today, it's the women who are the heads of those households, because the husbands are, or the men are nowhere to be seen. So we have that, and then there is it also, we need the issue of access to resources like land, technology, and financial services. Those barriers need to come down so that they're able to access finances that will help them to grow their businesses, that will help them to get an education, to upskill, their skills, and things like that. So this, to achieve economic empowerment, those barriers need to be broken down. And the only way it can be done is through a multi-sectoral approach. That means all disciplines that are engaged in that, the justice sector, the children's sector, the women's sector, and all those sectors needs to come, the human rights institutions and commissions need to come together and come up with something that, have a uniform thinking on this, and then move the program forward. So economic empowerment and poverty reduction, that's a big one for women. So the women, if they're able to reduce poverty, if they're able to take care of their families, like we said earlier, women are the ones, in many circumstances, women are the heads of their families. Sometimes the men are there, but they're not present, or they're there and maybe they don't have work, or they're there and they might not be able to work as well, because there could be that as well. So there is evidence, and this is from the UN Women document, that's evidence that increasing access to education, social services, asset ownership, and decision-making power significantly reduces poverty. So if we can, of educating women, if we can see the impact of them being able to access social services and asset ownership, and it's going to reduce poverty. I think that's what all nations are striving for, and it's actually an SDG that has to be achieved by 2030. So economic empowerment is measured through data, time spent in various activities, and levels of employment. And the indices, of course, are economic, and we're talking about economic. So they check
Your internet, Susan. I think it's hanging.
onto.
Sorry, Susan, your internet seems to be a bit playing around. Huh?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just repeat
Yeah.
I'll repeat what you've written there. It says increasing
Mm.
access to education and employment will help
Sorry, Susan. Oh boy. Well, anyway, as Susan is struggling, she's talking about the increase of access to assets and education and power reduces poverty, significantly reduces poverty. So sorry, Susan, your
yeah,
internet is playing around. I don't know if you want to restart or play
yeah,
around a bit, but we're
I can
almost at the end of the show. We've got
yes,
like 3 more
yes,
minutes. Yeah, if you don't
yes,
mind landing, that's what we call it.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, definitely. I hope please put your comments, add to this discussion and this discourse. Any
Hmm.
ideas on how we can improve things? You know, people watch the video popping out here and there. We're hoping that those who policy makers are coming across the videos and the discussions and able to pick one or two things. So your contribution by commenting will really, really enrich this discussion. And thank you so much for spending this 1.5 hours or so with us this evening. Good evening.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Susan. Yeah, that was very enlightening and very helpful. We learned a lot, guys. We learned a lot about the financial violence, the difference between financial violence and abuse. There's actually a difference. I didn't even know there was one until Susan talked about it. Thank God we have a lawyer here, human rights defender. She's right here. Okay, she's a human rights lawyer too. So, but anyway, I think that we know in I think there's the only people that we have missed out today are the faith-based organizations that really they need to also pay attention to the women and men and children who attend their churches and faith-based organizations to make sure that they are alerted as to who they can call and who they can who are the champions within your faith-based organization that they can come to. They should also preach against these issues of control of finances and control of and to reduce the economic impacts of gender-based violence, reduce the teenage pregnancies, yeah, and consider them a crime. That should be preached everywhere. Every single Sunday, people should be talking against these things. Young girls as well should also learn, to say no, to not allow people to touch their bodies, touch them in certain places. You see, because sometimes what happens because of our very strong patriarchal society, uh, children are not allowed to speak. Children, in many cases, especially in rural areas, they don't have the same rights or the same approach to parenting in the rural areas, for example, compared to the urban areas. And you might also find that, like we should talk about this perhaps in one of the other ones, the other shows that we do, the housing situation, the way people sleep, the way people live. There are many families right now, especially in the informal settlements, where the entire family is sharing one room. That makes it very easy for gender based violence to be extended between the adults and the children, sexual and gender based violence, by the way, where you find children doing things under the bed and adults are there over the bed. These are things that actually I came across in my work, working for an NGO in the slum areas of Kenya, where you find that the way that the houses, this is the reason why it's important to have separate rooms. At least there should be no family that has to share one room between all genders, male, female, and different ages. There should be a room for children and a room for adults, a separate room for sleeping, a separate room for entertaining, So I think those people who are building houses, also the architects and the planners, should all be involved in ensuring that they reduce incidences of GBV and abuse and financial violence and economic impacts just by the way that they design the homes and the spaces to reduce stress and to reduce this kind of, this kind of violence, this kind of behavior, to try to reduce the temptations and keep the boundaries, the traditional boundaries, still observe our cultures. Where, like, for example, in our culture, the man actually had a separate house altogether, which was called the Dingira. It was a hut that was in the middle of the compound, and women and children, lived around. That's not necessarily good now, but at least having separate rooms should be a requirement for families. Yeah, that no family should be actually allowed to stay all of them in one room, because that can actually it can promote child abuse, child and sexual and gender based violence, and it happens more often than you would even want to imagine. Yeah. Okay. So on that note, guys, thank you so much for your time. Today we're keeping it a little bit short and sweet. We'll see you on Wednesday with yet another show. Thank you so much, Fia, for being there in the comments. For those of you who have been coming on board, I've seen some of you land on our page on and off. I know many of you have told me that you watch the show after the show. Karibuni! Welcome to the show after the show. See you on Wednesday. And thank you for your time, Susan. And Kwaheri. Toodles. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.